It was supposed to be one of, if not the last delivery of the night for me. I was working at this pizzeria called Leonardo's. One of my bosses, Frank, was on the night shift with me. He would choose who does what delivery. We got an order for a couple regular pizzas. He gave me a piece of paper with the address on it and the person's phone number. This was in 2009. I didn't have a cell phone that had GPS, just a bare-bones flip phone. I also didn't have one of those Garmin GPS devices. I still had to use an old school book of maps to find my way around when doing deliveries. The name of the street that this house I was doing my last delivery for was something along the lines of Willows Road. I can't remember the house number, nor do I remember the name given for the order, but I do remember having the hardest time finding the place. It was in this really rural town with nothing but woods, farmland, and more woods. The lack of streetlights also didn't help. I had to pull over a few times and turn on the interior lights as I checked the map again. It was a very stress-inducing situation whenever I couldn't find a house. I was on a very quiet, dark, and confusing road when I decided to just call the number on the paper my boss gave me. The phone rang a bunch of times. It seemed that there was no answering machine set up to it. It had to have rung about 10 times before someone picked up, and I waited for someone to say hello. When no one did, I said it, and then a voice on the other end said it back. It was a low, deep, yet soft voice. I said, "This is the pizza guy. I'm just having a hard time finding your place." He explained that his driveway was easy to miss and looks like just a dirt trail. He talked in a very slow, monotone voice as he described the surroundings of his driveway to help me find it, and eventually, I did. I turned my car onto this pretty narrow dirt path. It was definitely easy to miss. It took about 30 seconds of me driving slowly and carefully up it until I saw this small one-story house come into view. There was a faint orange glow from inside the house that could be seen through one of the windows. I parked my car next to the only other vehicle in sight, this gallopy of a pickup truck. I grabbed the 2 pizzas from the passenger seat and walked to the front door of the house. I looked for a doorbell, couldn't find one, so I knocked on the door. I heard muffled music from inside the house. Then I heard footsteps approaching the doorstop, and then after maybe 10 seconds, the door cracked open, and I saw a quarter of someone's face. I literally could just see one of their eyes peeking out at me. I nervously said, "Hey, you ordered the pizza, right?" The guy said, "Oh yes, the pizza." I recognized the voice from the phone call from before. There was a weird pause. I didn't know what to say except for, "Do you have the cash?" He said yes. "Let me go get it." He walked away from the door, and I heard his footsteps move to another room. There was super old music from like the 1930s playing, making the setting just extra creepy and weird. If it weren't creepy enough already, then the door started slowly inching open on its own, revealing more and more of this dimly lit room. Everything about the interior of this place seemed super old. There were metal sheets on the floor, presumably covering holes in the floor. The couch looked like it was from a different century. Hell, all the furniture did. And the music was coming from a vintage-looking record player, one of those with the big horn-like thing at the top. That's all I could see at first from just sneaking a nosy peek inside the place. But what really was off-putting was the smell. It smelled like death in there. I waited respectfully for the guy to come back with the money from wherever he went. When enough time passed that I felt like it was getting weird, I knocked on the open door, took a peek inside, and said, "Sir?" The man's voice came from another room saying, "Yes, would you mind coming into the kitchen, please?" My co-workers and bosses always advised against stepping into anyone's house if you didn't have to. That advice seemed especially relevant for this circumstance. I heard what the man said, but I still responded, "Can you repeat that?" He repeated, "Can you come to the kitchen, please?" I stepped inside, and I honestly felt like my feet were going to crash through the floor. The place was so old that the floor actually caved in a bit as I stepped around. The house was very linear. I looked to the right and saw the entrance to the kitchen, where his voice was coming from. I looked to the left, and there was a narrow hallway which had a bunch of doors on the right side. At the end of the hallway, there was this guy with his back to me, slowly dancing in the creepiest way imaginable. The man was feeling himself. I don't mean he felt confident, I mean he was literally feeling his body as he moved in this really off-putting way. In any other circumstance, I would laugh, but I was downright disturbed of what kind of house I just walked into. I turned away and looked to the kitchen, still holding these 2 pizza boxes. I took a few steps toward the kitchen, before I even noticed the person peering around the edge of the wall separating the kitchen from the living room. It was that man's face again, still only showing like a quarter of his face. Just one of his eyes creepily peering at me. The only thoughts I had in this moment were, what the? Should I just leave? I repeated what I said at the front door moments ago, asking him again if he has the cash. The man didn't respond. He started to just giggle, or I don't even know what I'd call it, because the laugh was so deep in pitch, but it was so subtle and soft. Then he called out, "Randall," in a startlingly loud voice, much louder and more commanding in tone than his previous soft-spoken monotone voice. I was at my limit of how much weirdness I could take. I turned around and started walking back to the front door, and as I took a look down the hallway as I was about to walk outside, I noticed that the guy who was dancing seconds ago was now simply just standing there, looking back at me. I left through the front door and closed it behind me. I hurried back to the car, for some reason still holding the pizzas. I threw the pizza boxes in the passenger seat and got back in the car as quickly as possible. As I was backing my car up to clear the pickup truck next to it so that I could just do a 3-point turn, I did look back at the house, and the door was fully open again. My heart started beating even quicker at the thought that one of them was outside my car about to attempt to open one of the doors. Maybe they were, and I'll never know, but I managed to get my car down that dirt driveway and back onto the road. I had to return to the pizzeria. I called Frank to let him know what happened. He wasn't mad at me. When I got back to the pizzeria, everyone left. When I told them what happened, I can honestly see how it sounds like a funny situation when explaining it to others. But it was not funny in the moments. Whatever was going on in that house wasn't normal, and I don't think they had any intentions of buying pizza. I've had multiple dreams where I would see that man's face just peeking around from behind a wall. After that, I didn't enter anyone's houses or apartments while doing deliveries. October evening in Eastwood, a small town known for its vibrant college atmosphere and scenic beauty during the fall season. The air was filled with a crispness that whispered of changing leaves and approaching winter. Working as a bicycle delivery person for Speedy Subs at 19 had its moments, especially in Eastwood, where the college crowd meant busy nights and good tips. But on this particular night, things took a turn toward the unexpected. The last order of my shift was to a quiet house on Maple Lane, a familiar route near Eastwood College where I had delivered many times before. Yet, something felt off as I made my way through the unusually dark streets. Arriving at the destination, I immediately felt an eerie stillness, a stark contrast to the usually bustling town. My attention was drawn to a shadowy figure lurking in the bushes across from the house, a sight that set my nerves on edge. Convincing myself it was just the late hour playing tricks on my mind, I approached the front door, the crunch of gravel under my tires piercing the silence. No answer came from my ring, and the figure across the street seemed to be ominously still. Ignoring the growing unease, I knocked on the door again, louder, hoping for anyone to answer. Suddenly, the figure darted towards me, their intentions unclear but unmistakably threatening. Adrenaline flooded my system, propelling me into action. Without a second thought, I abandoned the delivery and dashed for my bike, the sound of my pursuer's steps a terrifying motivation. My only goal was to reach the safety of the brightly lit streets and the familiarity of Speedy Subs. I took a shortcut down a dark path, my heart pounding in my ears, the sounds of pursuit gradually fading. Only when I saw the welcoming glow of the store did I allow myself to slow down, bursting through the door to a crowd of concerned co-workers. After explaining what had happened, we called the local police, but their search turned up empty, leaving us with more questions than answers. The encounter left a lasting impression on me, teaching me the importance of vigilance and the understanding that danger can appear even in the familiar of places. From that night on, I promised myself to always be cautious, especially on late-night deliveries. Nearly midnight at Tony's Pizza, the smell of tomato sauce and melting cheese mingling with the aroma of the rain that had just started outside. I was getting ready for what was supposed to be the last delivery of the night, this time on a motorcycle due to the car's GPS being out of operation. The order was for a house on the outskirts of town, a place I had never delivered to before. With our GPS system still down for repair, I relied on a crumpled map and a vague description from my boss Marco to find the way. The air was heavy with mist as I set out, the motorcycle's headlights cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The journey felt longer than usual, the roads empty and winding. The house I was looking for was supposed to be at the end of a long driveway, easily missed if you weren't paying attention. When I finally turned onto the gravel road, my heart started to beat a little faster. The trees seemed to lean in closer as I approached, and the house that emerged from the shadows was old, its windows dimly lit and its paint peeling. I parked the motorcycle in front of the house, the sound of gravel crunching under my feet, breaking the silence as I walked to the door with the pizza. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from the eerie quiet that enveloped the place. I rang the bell and waited. The door creaked slowly open, revealing a man with a disturbing smile. "You're late," he said in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. I apologized, attributing the delay to the lack of GPS and the remote location. He insisted I come in while he fetched the money, a request that went against my better judgment, but something in his tone made it hard to refuse. The interior of the house was as unsettling as its occupant, adorned with old portraits that seemed to watch me and furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The air was stale, and a faint, inexplicable odor lingered. As I stood there waiting, the man who called himself Arthur called out for someone named Marcelo, his voice echoing through the empty halls. Then a giggle. Not the joyful kind, but one that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I turned to see another figure at the end of the hallway, just standing there staring at me. That's when panic set in. Arthur returned, but something in his demeanor had changed. He was almost giddy as he handed me the money, his eyes gleaming in a way that turned my stomach. I muttered a quick thanks and turned to leave, but not before he grabbed my arm with a grip stronger than necessary. "Do visit us again," he said, his voice low and menacing. I didn't need to be told twice. I practically ran back to my motorcycle, the pizza bag forgotten on the table. As I drove away, I could see in the rearview mirror the man and the figure in the hallway, both standing on the porch watching me leave. The ride back to Tony's Pizza was a blur, my mind full of questions about what had just happened. When I arrived, I was visibly shaken, recounting my experience to my colleagues, including Marco, who listened with a mix of disbelief and horror. I swore right then and there never to enter a customer's home again after making a delivery.